"Why are you saying all this? Is anything wrong?" he asked, dread swelling in his chest. The doctor sighed. "Not at all. Everything is fine. It's just that you have a health condition." "Please, doctor, just go straight to the point," Jabari nearly shouted. "What's the problem?" A pause, a breath. Then, "I'm sorry to say this, sir, but you are HIV positive." Silence, complete, deafening, soul-crushing silence. Jabari didn't scream, he didn't cry, he didn't move, he just sat there, frozen. The words rang in his ears like church bells in a graveyard. HIV positive. His lips parted slightly, but no words came. His hands fell to his knees. His eyes blinked slowly. For the first time in his adult life, Jabari felt like a child again, scared, helpless, cornered. The world suddenly looked dimmer. His plans, his success, his pride, all of it, gone in an instant. If grief had a face, it wore Jabari's that evening. The doctor continued speaking, offering counseling, treatment options, follow-up appointments, but Jabari heard none of it. All he could think was, how do I face my wife? How do I live like this? What have I done? On the fateful day, Jabari returned home. He did so with a trembling heart and no words prepared. He hadn't informed Zuri of his coming, partly out of fear, partly because he knew no amount of warning could soften the blow of what he had to say. Unfortunately, Zuri wasn't home when he arrived, so he sat and waited. Hours passed, the sun began to retreat, and the clouds took on a moody grey. As darkness crept in and the soft breeze picked up, Jabari sat outside in his suit, his eyes empty, his thoughts loud, and his heart heavy. Then came the sound that made his breath catch, a car horn at the gate. The gateman opened up, and just as Jabari expected, it was Zuri driving in. He straightened up, wiping his clammy palms on his trousers, bracing for impact, not from her hands, but from her heartbreak. Zuri parked her car and stepped out, immediately puzzled by the sight of her husband sitting outside, looking gaunt and broken. She blinked twice, not sure if what she saw was real. "Jabari," she called out, walking toward him cautiously. "What are you doing here? Did you just arrive? Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" Her voice was layered with confusion, concern, and a trace of relief. But all of that disappeared the moment Jabari looked up, and she saw the tears resting in his eyes. Her steps slowed, her heart skipped. "Jabari, what's wrong? You're scaring me. What's going on?" she asked, now gently placing her hands on his shoulders. And finally, after weeks of silence and torment, Jabari opened his mouth and said the words that would forever change everything between them. "I messed up, babe. I really did." "What did you do?" Zuri asked, her voice now low, still unaware of the storm heading her way. "Talk to me. I promise to understand." He took a shaky breath and dropped the bombshell. "I cheated on you, and now I have HIV." Zuri's world stopped spinning. Her vision blurred. Her breath caught in her throat. Her body froze. "Is this a prank?" she asked, her voice shaking, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I wish it was," Jabari replied softly, his voice cracking under the weight of guilt. A long, painful silence followed. Then Zuri stumbled a step backward, clutching her chest. "When? How? How can this even be possible?" "Jabari, explain now before I lose my mind." Tears streamed down his face as he tried to respond. "It's the devil's work, babe. I don't know how I let this happen. I didn't mean to hurt you." "Don't start with that," she yelled through tears. "Don't you dare say that now. You didn't mean to hurt me, yet here we are. How could you, Jabari?" She demanded answers, and he gave them, every single one. From the business trip, to Anne, to the seduction, the unprotected sex, the discovery of the antiretroviral drugs, and the horrifying hospital test. Each detail cut Zuri deeper than the last. By the time he was done, Zuri was weeping uncontrollably. Her face was pale, her eyes red and wide. The betrayal, the devastation, it was too much. Without another word, she turned around, stormed into her car, and drove off into the night. Jabari chased after her, jumped into his own vehicle, and tried to follow, but she was gone. The darkness swallowed her car, and no matter where he looked or who he called, she remained missing. 3 agonizing days passed. Jabari searched tirelessly, calling everyone they both knew, but no one had seen Zuri, and none of her numbers were reachable. He barely slept. He barely ate. His soul was rotting from the inside out. What he didn't know, however, was that Zuri had taken refuge in Jane's home, her best friend, the one person she trusted enough to break down completely in front of. For days, Zuri cried until her voice was hoarse. She barely ate, barely spoke. Jane tried everything to console her, but how do you heal a heart so thoroughly shattered? When Zuri finally calmed down enough to have a conversation, Jane sat her down for the talk they both dreaded. "What do you want to do now, Zuri? Are you going back? Or is this the end?" Zuri stared at the wall, silent for a long moment. Then, with tear-streaked cheeks, she whispered, "I don't know. How do I go back to someone I can never touch again? How do I love a man who's taken away the one thing I dreamed of most? Being a mother. How do I pretend everything's okay when I know, deep down, nothing will ever be the same again?" She broke down again, weeping bitterly. "I waited. I was faithful. I was patient. And now I get this? I never even got to carry his child. I may never get to." Jane held her close. They cried together. Two women, one crushed by betrayal, the other heartbroken by what life had done to her friend. And in that moment, Zuri wasn't a wife anymore. She wasn't strong. She wasn't hopeful. She was simply broken. While Zuri's whereabouts remained unknown, Jabari was falling apart piece by piece. Each morning he woke up, the weight of her absence pressed harder on his chest. The silence of his phone, the empty spaces in their home, the quiet moments he used to take for granted, now all haunted him. He contacted everyone, family, friends, old classmates, even co-workers, anyone who had ever shared a moment with Zuri. But still, nothing. She was like a ghost, unreachable, untouchable, lost. Then, after more than a week of silence, a miracle, or maybe fate, came knocking. Jane called. She didn't say much, just enough. "She's here, she's safe, but not okay." The moment Jabari heard those words, he didn't even hang up properly before grabbing his keys and dashing to his car. He drove like a man possessed, whispering desperate prayers between deep breaths. When he arrived at Jane's house, he knocked softly, respectfully. Jane, already expecting him, opened the door and studied his face. The suit he wore was wrinkled, his beard unkempt, his eyes sunken, but worst of all was the brokenness in his gaze. She said nothing, just gestured for him to come in and wait. Then she turned and walked toward the room where Zuri was lying. "Someone is here to see you," Jane said gently, her voice laced with hesitation. Zuri turned her head slightly, not moving. "Who is that?" she asked with suspicion. Jane gave a small sigh. "Just come, see for yourself." Reluctantly, Zuri stood up. Her legs were weak, her heart heavier than her steps. They walked down the hallway in silence until they entered the living room. And there he was, Jabari. Zuri's eyes landed on him. Her breath hitched, her stomach turned. "What is he doing here?" she asked, the tremble in her voice betrayed by the tears forming already. Jane stepped forward. "Please, just hear him out. You can't hide forever. It's time to talk, to decide how you move forward, whatever that means for both of you." As Jane spoke, Zuri's anger boiled to the surface, but her tears came faster. Jabari stood still, like a man on trial, his hands by his sides, voice trembling. "Babe, please, can we talk?" Zuri turned sharply, her voice cracking from emotion. "Talk? About what? About how you slept with another woman and brought HIV into my life? About how you crushed my heart into pieces I may never be able to put back together? Jabari, just look at me. I'm not the same. You turned me into someone I don't even recognize anymore." Jabari's lips quivered. He wanted to go to her, to touch her hand, to hold her. But he knew better. He had no right to reach for her anymore. "I just want us to go home and figure this out before I drown in this pain," he pleaded. Zuri stared at him, the pain behind her eyes now turning to ice. "We don't have a home anymore," she said flatly. "I'm sorry, but I'm done with this marriage." The words hit Jabari like a whip to the soul. He staggered slightly, like the wind had been knocked out of him. He stood in silence, processing, bleeding internally. "Babe, please don't do this. I know I failed you. I know I did something unforgivable, but I need you, he said, his voice strained with grief. But Zuri was unmoved. She clenched her fists and stared him down. "You think this is about you, Jabari? You selfish, selfish man. Have you even stopped for a second to think about me? What it feels like to know my husband cheated, lied, and could have sentenced me to death without blinking. What it feels like to know that all the nights I cried for your presence, you were giving yourself to someone else." She paused, her chest heaving. "I begged for your love. I begged for your attention. I fought for this marriage while you were out playing a dangerous game behind my back. Jabari, I hate you for what you've done to me. I hate you for what you've made me become. Just get out. Get out." The anger in her voice was thunderous. Jane stepped in, holding Zuri gently, as she broke down again. Jabari, feeling his soul sink to a level he never thought possible, simply lowered his head. He didn't fight back. He didn't plead again. He had lost the strength to. He looked at Zuri one last time, eyes filled with sorrow, then turned slowly toward the door. Without a word, he walked away from the only woman he ever truly loved, away from the home he destroyed, away from the future he had once dreamed of. The door closed quietly behind him, but inside Jane's house, the echoes of pain lingered, and outside, a man walked back into a world where the price of betrayal wasn't just loneliness, it was a lifetime of silent suffering. As he drove away from Jane's house that night, he felt completely hollow. The streets looked dimmer, the air tasted stale, everything sounded muffled. Loneliness and rejection began creeping in like a virus of their own. Quiet, slow, but deadly, and as the days followed, it became clear. If Zuri's decision didn't change, depression was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty. It was now painfully obvious that Jabari had received far more than what he had ever bargained for. Yes, he had made a terrible mistake. Yes, he had broken sacred vows. But in his eyes, he was still human, still deserving of a second chance, still deserving of pity perhaps. But pity never came. Not from Zuri, not from the world. Too bad life wasn't going in his favor. Meanwhile, back at Jane's house, Zuri collapsed into the worst breakdown she had ever experienced in her life. The moment Jabari shut that door and walked away, she fell to the floor with a thud, her arms hugging herself tightly as if to keep her shattered pieces from spilling out. She screamed, she wailed, she beat the ground. It was not just crying, it was a mourning of love, a mourning of her dreams, a mourning of a future that would never be. "Why me? Why did this happen to me, God?" she cried out over and over, her voice hoarse and cracking. "What did I do to deserve this?" Jane stood by, helpless, wiping her own tears silently. She tried to hold Zuri, but the pain was too deep. It rejected comfort. Days passed. Jabari went through the motions of life like a machine. He attended meetings, signed contracts, answered emails, but it was all robotic. His eyes were dim, his words few. The once vibrant man, who turned heads in every room, now looked like he was fading, quietly and painfully. He kept his diagnosis hidden from the public, but not from the pain. Then, about a week later, Zuri finally opened up to her family. The moment the words left her lips, "Jabari is HIV positive," her mother nearly fainted. Her father paced the living room in disbelief, muttering prayers and questions that had no answers. "How? What do you mean? When? Is this a joke?" And just like that, the secret wasn't a secret anymore. Word spread like wildfire through their extended family. And in a world where family talk moved faster than the internet, it didn't take long for Jabari's family to hear the whispers too. It hit like a bomb. Calls came in like an invasion. Every minute, someone new dialing his line. His phone barely rested. Cousins, uncles, aunties, old friends. "Is it true, Jabari? Why didn't you tell us? How did it happen? Are you okay? How could you do this to Zuri? You of all people." Some called out of concern, others out of curiosity, but most out of disappointment. And for Jabari, every call was another knife to the chest. He tried to smile in public. He wore his best suits. He said all the right things in meetings. But the truth? He was a man dying inside. His nights were the worst. He'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling for hours, hearing Zuri's voice over and over in his head. "I hate you for what you've done to me," over and over, until he fell asleep or broke down crying. It was only a matter of time before his health, physical and mental, began to reflect what was happening in his soul. Jabari had fallen from grace, and all he could ask now was, "Can anything ever be salvaged from this ruin I've made of my life?" Despite the fact that many people were disappointed and devastated by Jabari's condition, they still showed him support in one way or another. His family, especially his father, became his strongest anchor. His dad was always by his side, driving him to the hospital, sitting patiently through long checkups, and helping him manage his medications. They didn't talk much during those drives. The silence was heavy, but comforting in a strange way. His father's presence was enough. The old man had aged overnight with the shock of the news, but he never once scolded his son. He simply showed up, day after day, a silent warrior bearing the pain with him. Jabari's inner circle rallied around him too. Close friends, siblings, his doctor, his mother, they all became an invisible wall of protection around his crumbling life. They made sure the news of his HIV status didn't leak to the outside world. Everything was kept within trusted arms. They encouraged him, prayed with him, cooked for him, called every morning. But amidst all that love and loyalty, one person remained, glaringly absent, Zuri. And her absence was louder than all their combined presence. It had been almost 2 months since Zuri walked out of their home and never returned. She was still squatting at Jane's house, buried in confusion, heartbreak, and unrelenting sorrow. She avoided all contact with Jabari, didn't answer his calls, didn't read his texts, didn't open his voicemails. Her silence was brutal, not because it was deliberate, but because it was raw. And for Jabari, that was the part that hurt more than the virus. More than the weight loss, more than the social stigma, more than the looks of pity from his mother when she brought him food. Zuri's silence killed him slowly. Every night, Jabari lay in bed with his phone by his side, staring at her name on the screen. Typing would flash for a moment sometimes, and vanish, hope, then disappointment, and then slowly his body began to show the toll of his inner decay. He started losing weight, drastically, not because his medications weren't working, not because he lacked money or access to top-tier medical care, but because he was giving up. He ate less, smiled less, moved less. Each evening, he would go up to the balcony of their once vibrant home and sit for hours. He stared into the night sky as though it could give him answers. Sometimes he cried. Other times, he whispered soft apologies, to no one in particular. "Zuri, I miss you. Please come home. Please forgive me. I'm sorry." He would murmur those words to the stars. He imagined her standing beside him sometimes, imagined what he would say if she were there. Then he'd whisper into the wind and hope somehow it would carry his words to wherever she was. One fateful evening, Jabari sat outside on the porch, thin as a shadow of himself, lost in thoughts that swirled like a storm inside his chest. The air was still, except for the soft chirping of crickets and the distant hum of traffic beyond the estate walls. His eyes, sunken and weary, were fixed on the stars above. They seemed so far away, cold, distant, and indifferent to the suffering of men. Then, from the depths of his breaking heart, a low hum rose from his throat, a sorrowful song from his childhood. His mother used to sing it on nights when the world seemed too heavy. It was a song of longing, of waiting for peace to come with morning light. His voice cracked with each note, and tears fell freely from his eyes, glistening on his cheeks like dew under moonlight. After the final verse faded into silence, Jabari touched his forehead. It was warm, too warm. A slight fever had been brewing for days, but he no longer cared. He tiredly rose to his feet, body heavy with exhaustion, and staggered inside. The house was dark, quiet, haunting. He didn't go upstairs to the bed. Instead, he laid himself down on the cold tiled floor of the sitting room, as if punishing himself for the life he once destroyed. There, he closed his eyes and drifted into a restless sleep. Later that night, the gateman came in to lock up and saw his boss lying on the floor, vulnerable, alone, and fragile. His heart shattered. The man he once admired for his sharpness and strength was now reduced to this. Quietly, the gateman bent down, lifted Jabari into his arms, and carried him upstairs. He gently laid him on the bed, pulled a thin blanket over his frail body, then left the room, shaking his head with quiet grief. Meanwhile, far across town, Zuri sat upright in bed, with her hand pressed tightly against her chest. She felt something, a sudden, unexplained ache that made her breath short and shallow. It wasn't physical, it was emotional, spiritual even. It felt like someone had whispered his name into her soul. Jabari. She tried to brush it off, but the more she fought the feeling, the more disturbed she became. Her chest tightened. Her eyes welled up, and without knowing why, tears began to fall. She buried her face into her pillow, trying to push the thoughts away. But the image of Jabari lying alone, helpless, suffering, it haunted her. For the past 2 months, she had fought hard to hate him, to forget him, to stay angry. But in that moment, something shifted. It was as if his pain had reached out and touched her. She suddenly remembered the man he was before the affair. The man who made her laugh, who danced with her in the kitchen, who carried her in his arms the night they moved into their home. She remembered his eyes that used to burn with life. Now they were just dim. And for the first time in 2 months, Zuri thought, what if I never get to say goodbye? A silent war began to rage in her chest, between pain and compassion. But it didn't take long before compassion won. Zuri got out of bed and stood by the window for a while, staring into the night. Then, without saying a word, she walked into Jane's room. I need to go see him, she said quietly. Jane turned to look at her in shock. Are you sure? Zuri nodded slowly, tears brimming again. I don't know what I'm going to say, or do, but I need to see him. I need to know he's still holding on. Without wasting time, Jane gave her a reassuring hug and offered to drive. But Zuri declined. This is something I need to do alone, she whispered. Within minutes, she was on the road. The drive was silent. The city lights blurred past as her heart pounded with anxiety. Was he even going to want to see her? Was she ready to see what had become of him? By the time she pulled up at the gate of their home, it was nearly midnight. The gateman was startled when he saw her car, but quickly opened the gate, recognizing her. As Zuri stepped out, she looked around the compound. Everything was still the same. Yet everything had changed. She walked into the house, slowly and cautiously, afraid of what she would find. The living room was dim, the silence almost unbearable. She noticed a pillow on the cold floor, and her heart clenched. She walked upstairs, her heels echoing faintly against the tiled floor, and paused outside their bedroom. With trembling hands, she opened the door. There he was, lying on the bed, fragile, pale, asleep but visibly worn out. His chest rose and fell softly, but there was no peace in his expression. His beard had grown out unevenly. His collarbone showed through his shirt. He looked empty. Zuri's lips quivered as tears streamed down her face. She slowly walked to the side of the bed and sat down beside him. She didn't wake him. She just sat there, watching. Her fingers trembled as she reached out to touch his hand, the same hand that once held hers with confidence and warmth. And at the touch of her fingers, Jabari stirred slightly. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment he thought he was dreaming. Zuri, he whispered, voice barely audible. She nodded, unable to speak. Jabari's eyes flooded with tears as he weakly sat up. Is it really you? Zuri couldn't hold it anymore. She leaned forward and wrapped her arms gently around him, careful not to break him, but needing to feel that he was still there. I'm here, she whispered through sobs. I don't know what's next, but I'm here. Jabari cried like a child in her arms. The moment was fragile, broken, but sacred. 2 shattered hearts, 1 heavy silence, and the faintest flicker of hope. I decided to put our differences aside and come check up on you. What's the current situation of your health? She asked gently, keeping her composure. I'm good, just depressed, he answered honestly. The doctor says it's normal for newly diagnosed patients, but I'm taking my meds. I'm trying. When he said HIV, it hit Zuri all over again, like a blow to the chest. The word echoed in her head. This was her reality now, her husband's reality. The man she once dreamed of building a family with was now living a life neither of them ever imagined. She blinked and dropped her gaze. A tear escaped. Why are you crying, my darling? Jabari asked with concern, reaching for her hand. She couldn't speak, because how do you explain a pain that has no words? She squeezed his hand instead, and he understood. No more words were needed that moment. They just sat there side by side, 2 broken people, 2 heavy hearts, and the flicker of a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could face the darkness together. The atmosphere suddenly became sad as both parties started tearing up. Jabari didn't know exactly what he said, or did, that could have triggered Zuri's emotions, but deep down, he knew it had everything to do with his condition, the reality they were now forced to face. As Zuri sat on the edge of the bed, covering her face with both hands, tears rolled freely down her cheeks. Jabari wanted so badly to comfort her, to wrap his arms around her and whisper that everything would be all right. But he couldn't. He had lost that privilege, at least for now. He didn't want to push boundaries or make her feel cornered. Instead, he just sat and watched her, his heart aching at the sight of the woman he had once promised to protect, now breaking before his very eyes. The silence was heavy, uncomfortable, almost suffocating. But after about 6 long, quiet minutes, Jabari finally found the courage to speak. His voice was low, gentle, and almost trembling. "Do you know, I thank God every single day that I'm the only one carrying this virus?" he said, eyes fixed on the floor. "Every night, when the world is quiet, I sit outside and stare at the moon. I thank God that I didn't infect you. I thank Him that you're safe, that you didn't have to suffer because of my foolishness." Zuri sniffled and looked up slightly, but said nothing. Her lips quivered. "I can't imagine what it would have done to me if you had caught it too," Jabari continued. "I would have never forgiven myself, Zuri, not even in death." His voice cracked at that last line. He swallowed hard. "I know I messed up. I was working so hard, trying to build us a future where you and our children would never have to struggle. I was chasing security, chasing comfort. But in the process, I lost touch with the now. I forgot to love you now. I forgot to show up for you. And for that, I'll never stop being sorry." Zuri wiped her eyes again, listening. "I didn't cheat on you with countless women, just one," Jabari confessed. "Only once, and even that, I regret with every fiber of my being. And she was a mistake, a terrible one. I only met with her twice. The second time, I saw the antiretroviral drugs in her bag, and that's when my life changed." He paused, then looked up at Zuri. "I can't undo the past. I wish I could. But I feel lighter just telling you the truth." When he was done, Zuri looked at him for a long moment. Her heart was broken, her trust deeply wounded, but she also saw the broken man in front of her. The tears in his eyes weren't manipulative, they were real, and they reflected the weight of a man who knew he had lost something precious. Part of her wanted to run to him, to hold him, to whisper that they would be okay, but her rational side pulled her back. So she simply nodded, her own tears falling again. She clenched her hands tightly in her lap to stop herself from reaching out. "I hear you," she finally said in a whisper, "and I believe you." That alone meant the world to Jabari. They sat in silence again. But this time, it wasn't painful. It was healing, like pressing a warm cloth to a fresh wound. Eventually, Zuri looked at her watch and stood up slowly. "I have to go," she said gently. "There are a few things I need to attend to today." Jabari nodded, trying to hide the disappointment in his eyes. He had hoped she would stay longer, but he understood. Before she left, she turned back and looked at him one more time. "Call me if you need help getting to the hospital, or if you're too weak to step out. Just call. I'm not ready to talk about us yet, but I can still be there for you as a human being, as someone who once loved you deeply, and maybe still does, even if it hurts right now." Jabari stared at her, his lips parted. "Zuri," he whispered. She held up her hand gently. "Let's not talk about that now. One step at a time." He nodded. "Thank you," he said, with all the gratitude in his soul. She walked to the door, paused, and said one last thing before leaving. "Don't waste time trying to undo what's already done. Focus on where you're going from here, and please, eat something. I'll check on you later." And with that, she was gone. Jabari sat in silence for a while, staring at the closed door. Then, for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Just a little. Maybe it wasn't over. Maybe grace still existed, even in broken places. Oh, what an awesome way for Jabari to start the day. He was overly motivated to live and not give up on himself. The fact that Zuri showed up that morning and wiped his tears gave him a kind of strength that no medication or therapy had managed to provide. It was the medicine of hope, the powerful assurance that someone still cared. From that moment, something shifted in Jabari. The depression that had taken root in his soul began to lift ever so gently, and in its place came a renewed desire to fight, to heal, and to live. He began to take his medications more seriously, eat healthy, and even walk outside for fresh air and sunlight. He started journaling his journey and would write encouraging notes to himself each morning, reminding his spirit that this wasn't the end. The virus might have invaded his body, but it hadn't conquered his will. Zuri became a regular presence in his life, not as his wife, but as his best friend and silent strength. She would check in on him every other day, help organize his meds, run errands, and sometimes just sit with him on the balcony as they watched the sky darken into night. They laughed occasionally, shared silence more often, and built a new kind of relationship that was rooted in forgiveness, compassion, and honesty. There were boundaries, though, firm but unspoken ones. They didn't sleep in the same bed. They didn't touch much. Their conversations, though deep and warm, never crossed into romantic territory. It was clear that, while they had both found peace, they hadn't necessarily found their way back to each other romantically. Jabari still wore his wedding ring. Every morning, he'd slip it on with a sigh, as if it were both a symbol of memory and hope. But Zuri had stopped wearing hers. She had removed it during her first week at Jane's house and had never worn it since. It wasn't a rebellious act. It was simply a quiet statement of where her heart stood. To her, the marriage had ended the moment trust died. Though Jabari had earned her forgiveness, her faith in their romantic future hadn't quite returned. As time moved on, people began to notice Zuri's bare finger. A few friends, and then colleagues, and before long, eligible men began to reach out. Some were subtle, a gentle compliment, an offer to buy lunch. Others were more direct, expressing admiration for her strength and beauty. At first, Zuri waved them off, not wanting to feel like she was betraying Jabari. But eventually, she reminded herself of something she had almost forgotten. She still wanted to be a mother, still wanted to love and be loved in return. And the hard truth was that Jabari, as wonderful and remorseful as he had become, could no longer give her everything she had once dreamed of. It wasn't just about the virus, it was about starting over. One fateful day, while Zuri was at the office, a gentleman in his late 30s came to book their services for his firm. The secretary tapped gently on her door and said, "Ma'am, there's someone here to see you. He says it's business-related." Zuri nodded. "Please let him in." Moments later, the door opened, and in walked a tall, well-dressed man with a commanding yet calm presence. His steps were deliberate, his eyes kind. He wore a tailored navy blue suit and a confident smile. "Hello, good day," he began, extending his hand. "I assume you are the boss here?" Zuri shook his hand and gave a polite smile. "Yes, I am. Please, have a seat. How may we help you?" He sat down and leaned slightly forward. "My name is Kwame. I'm the operations lead at Oridis Group. We have our annual executive retreat coming up next month, and I've heard remarkable things about your team's event management and ushering services. I figured I'd come to the best." Zuri's eyes lit up, both from the compliment and the potential partnership. "That's very kind of you, Kwame. We'd be honored to work with you. Let's go over the details." They dived into the planning. Budget, logistics, expected guests, vision for the event. What was meant to be a brief business discussion ended up stretching past an hour, with laughter peppered between strategy points. There was something refreshing about Kwame. He was confident without being arrogant, respectful, attentive, and surprisingly down to earth. As the meeting wrapped up and the contract was sealed, Kwame stood and smiled. "Well, I'm glad we've made this official. I trust you'll blow us away." "You won't be disappointed," Zuri said confidently. It was a clean, professional meeting, yet something lingered in the air as he left. A strange warmth. Zuri noticed it too. She hadn't shared laughter like that with a man, outside of her marriage, in what felt like forever. It was odd, it felt like something awakening. The event came quickly, and true to her promise, Zuri and her team delivered excellence. The guests were impressed. Kwame was more than pleased. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, Kwame approached her as she stood at the edge of the hall, reviewing a checklist. "You've outdone yourself," he said sincerely. Zuri smiled, flushed with professional pride. "Thank you, Kwame. I'm glad it went well." "I think a little celebration is in order," he added with a playful tone. She hesitated. "Celebrate?" "Just something simple, nothing serious. You deserve it. Drinks on me." After a brief pause, Zuri nodded. "All right, just for a short while. They left the event center and drove to a quiet rooftop bar not too far away. The music was soft, the breeze gentle, and the city lights below twinkled like stars. Over a glass of wine and light conversation, the atmosphere grew comfortable. Not romantic, not yet, but warm, like two people learning to breathe again after a long silence. As the evening mellowed, Kwame leaned back and studied her face. "You have a beautiful way about you, graceful but strong. I know this is sudden, but I'd really love to take you out again. A real date this time." Zuri froze. For a moment, her breath caught in her chest. Her fingers played nervously with the stem of her glass. There was a strange weight behind his words. Honest, gentle, but heavy. Heavy because of what they meant. Heavy because of what she was carrying. Her mind drifted to Jabari. His frailty, his tears, his whispered gratitude. She remembered sitting beside him on that balcony, hearing his regrets, seeing the guilt buried behind his eyes. She also remembered all the nights she cried alone, the betrayal, the breakdown. And yet, she didn't feel angry anymore, just uncertain. After a long pause, she answered softly, "I'll think about it." Kwame smiled, not pushing. "Take your time, I'll be here." The date was set for that weekend. The days leading up to it were strange for Zuri. She kept going back and forth in her mind. Was she ready? Was this right? She wasn't married anymore, at least not in the heart of it. But there was still something sacred about what she and Jabari once had. Could she really open her heart again? On Friday night, she finally made a decision. She laid out a simple emerald green dress and told herself, "You are not betraying anyone. You're just living again." Nevertheless, Zuri thought it was important to inform Jabari about the recent turn of events, so he wouldn't be caught off guard if he happened to hear it from someone else. On Friday evening that week, she went to visit him, and he was visibly thrilled to see her. They shared a meal and exchanged laughter over casual conversations. Their bond had evolved into a genuine and heartwarming friendship. Everything was going smoothly until Zuri brought up a serious topic. "Can we talk for a moment?" "There's something important I need to discuss with you," Zuri said gently. Jabari straightened up, prepared to give her his full attention. "What's it?" he asked, his voice calm. Looking at him with a soft, sorrowful expression, she began, "Since we're no longer in a marital relationship, I believe it's only fair that we both consider moving on with our lives, don't you think?" Jabari sat still, offering no immediate reply. It felt as though a heavy load had just crashed down on him. Not once had he allowed himself to seriously imagine Zuri being with another man. The thought alone was terrifying enough to make him avoid it entirely. Now he could sense that someone else had already entered the picture, because Zuri wouldn't have brought up such a conversation otherwise. "Are you seeing someone already?" he asked quietly, his voice heavy with worry. "What do you mean by already?" Zuri responded, but Jabari remained fixated on his question. "Are you involved with someone else?" he asked again, sadness thick in his tone as he braced himself for the worst. Looking directly into his eyes, Zuri exhaled deeply and delivered the painful truth. "Yes, I'm seeing someone, and I think it's time we officially go our separate ways through a divorce. I still love you, but I can't keep living in limbo like this. I want to have my own children someday, and to do that, I need to let go of the marriage title once and for all," she replied with sadness. At that moment, Jabari's eyes welled with tears, and he muttered, "So, this is what it has come to." Zuri slowly nodded and replied, "Yes, sadly it is." That was the moment reality hit him. She was truly considering moving on. He had never anticipated it to happen so soon. After processing the shock, Jabari finally found the strength to speak. "You're really going to leave me, aren't you? If that's true, then what reason do I have to go on?" he murmured, his voice heavy with sorrow. Instantly, Zuri interrupted him to refute that idea. "Don't say things like that. You still have many reasons to live, and not just because of me. Your life still holds meaning and purpose, even if I'm no longer by your side as your partner. I care about you deeply, and you know that. But at this stage, love alone isn't enough to hold this marriage together. Look at me. I'm only 32 years old with so much of life still ahead. I can't put my future on hold indefinitely. I dream of having children, and clearly, that's something you can't help me with right now. So what am I supposed to do? Sacrifice another chance at joy just to remain the faithful and supportive wife? I don't think that would be fair to either of us." As much as I don't want to play the blame game, you have to admit this situation was caused by your own actions. You violated our vows and tossed away everything we built. As painful as this is the reality we now face, Zuri said sorrowfully. In that instant he felt paralyzed, numb to everything around him. He lowered his head as his thoughts drifted back to the beautiful moments they once shared. It was heartbreaking to realize that their once blissful marriage had disintegrated beyond repair. Only divine grace could help Jabari endure the emotional wreckage he now faced. Seeing that he was no longer responding to anything she was saying, Zuri decided it was time to go. I'll get going now. I'll give you a call tomorrow, she said softly before walking away. Once she was out of sight, Jabari broke down completely. He cried with a depth of pain he hadn't felt before. In that moment, life seemed entirely void of meaning, and soon after, he began sinking back into a dark, depressive state. While Jabari remained deep in the grip of depression, Zuri was outliving her best life with the new man who had entered her world, Benjamin. He embodied everything she had once longed for in Jabari. He always made her his top priority and never gave her reasons to feel neglected or unimportant. Thoughtful in his actions and emotionally mature, Benjamin brought a refreshing presence into Zuri's life. With time, Zuri's attention began to shift. She started investing less effort into caring for Jabari and more into spending time with Benjamin. It wasn't entirely deliberate. Her schedule with Benjamin was always full, from outings to shared plans and new experiences. On the rare occasions she had free time, she made it a point to check in on Jabari, but those moments became increasingly infrequent. Zuri's emotional distance left Jabari feeling abandoned, leading him to neglect his health. Eventually, he began skipping meals and completely abandoned his daily antiretroviral drug regimen. These medications were vital for managing his HIV, but he no longer cared about his condition. Weeks turned into months, and Jabari continued spiraling, unbeknownst to Zuri or his family, who had no idea he had stopped taking his treatment. It wasn't long before the physical signs began to show. He lost a significant amount of weight and started falling ill frequently. The visible decline in his health caught the attention of people around him. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers began to notice something was seriously wrong. Then came the day everything took a turn for the worse. During a business meeting, Jabari suddenly collapsed mid-session. He was rushed to the hospital in an emergency, but remained unresponsive despite the doctor's efforts. Concerned about his rapidly deteriorating condition, the attending physician ordered several tests, suspecting a deeper issue. While the tests were being run, word reached Zuri and Jabari's parents, who hurried to the hospital in alarm. After some time, the doctor returned and asked for the immediate family to follow him to his office. Zuri, along with Jabari's mother and father, left the waiting area and walked behind the doctor to a private room. Once they were seated, the doctor looked tense but composed. Before he could begin to explain the results, Zuri interjected calmly. "Doctor, if you're calling us in because of the HIV diagnosis, we already know about that," she said plainly. What she didn't expect was that the doctor had far worse news to deliver. He exhaled deeply, paused, and then gave them the heartbreaking truth. "I wish this was only about HIV," he said softly. "But the unfortunate reality is that his condition has progressed to full-blown AIDS. At this stage, we're not sure how much time he has left." Zuri's heart dropped. She screamed out in disbelief. "What? No, not Jabari!" The doctor's revelation sent a wave of anguish through the room. Jabari's mother broke down completely, wailing uncontrollably. After a moment of silent shock, Zuri followed, tears pouring down her face. Jabari's father stood frozen, overcome with grief, unsure who needed comforting more, his wife or his son's former partner. Both women were clearly inconsolable. "Not my son, this can't be real. We made sure he got the best medication, the most advanced treatments. The doctors assured us he would be fine, that he could live a full life, even up to his 90s. How is this happening? Are you sure this report belongs to my son? This isn't possible," his mother cried out in despair. The room was filled with pain, disbelief, and sorrow, and for Jabari's loved ones, the nightmare was just beginning. Meanwhile, Zuri wasn't making the situation any easier. Her tears flowed without control. The moment Jabari's mother finished speaking, Zuri stepped in and asked, "Doctor, please, where is he? Can we see him?" she asked quietly, her voice shaking. The doctor nodded in agreement, and together they all made their way to Jabari's hospital room, trying their best to keep their emotions in check as they walked through the hallway. The instant Zuri stepped into the room and laid eyes on the man who had once turned her world upside down, the same man she had fallen hopelessly in love with, she nearly collapsed on the spot. It all felt surreal, like a terrible nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Her mind immediately flashed back to the day they exchanged vows at the altar, promising to love and cherish each other until their final breaths. Now, seeing him in such a devastating state, the weight of how far things had fallen hit her hard. Once everyone had settled inside the room, the doctor quietly excused himself to attend to other urgent matters, leaving the family alone. The first 5 minutes passed in silence. No one spoke. The room was filled with grief and tension as they all struggled to find words. Jabari, unconscious and unaware of their presence, lay still on the hospital bed. Zuri stepped out to dismiss Jabari's associates, and though the day was emotionally draining, everyone held on to a fragile hope for his recovery. As evening approached and the sky dimmed, Zuri urged Jabari's parents to return home and get some rest. Though they were reluctant at first, they eventually agreed, realizing there wasn't enough space in the room for everyone to sleep comfortably. Once the room was quiet and empty again, Zuri climbed into Jabari's bed and lay beside him. Silent tears streamed down her face as she gazed at the man she had once called her husband. Watching him slowly deteriorate, right before her eyes, helpless to stop it, tore her apart. She wrapped her arms around him gently from the side and cried softly. After some time, she began to speak to him, though he remained unconscious. "I never thought I'd live to see a day like this," she whispered. "A day when I wouldn't get to cook your meals, tease you about your terrible jokes, or call you the sweet names you used to love. A day I wouldn't argue with you anymore about how you always made work come first." Her voice cracked as the memories overwhelmed her. "I always thought we'd go the distance, that we'd have kids, your kids, and I'd get to carry a piece of you inside me. I dreamed of us growing old together. What happened, Jabari? Why did it turn out like this? Why did you push me away and take all of that from us? I miss you so badly it hurts, and nothing would ever feel right again if it's not with you. I love you, more than words could ever say. Please don't go. Your family needs you. I need you. Come back to us, please." Zuri clung to him, her tears soaking his shoulder. Eventually, exhaustion won over, and she drifted into sleep beside him after pouring her heart out through the night. That night was filled with terrifying dreams. Each time Zuri woke up in a panic, she whispered prayers, asking God to spare Jabari's life. By morning, Jabari's parents returned to the hospital. They immediately began to pray fervently at his bedside, trusting God for a miracle. A few other relatives joined them as well. Since the room was now crowded, Zuri excused herself to go home, freshen up, and promised to return later. Everyone thanked her warmly for her unwavering support and compassion towards Jabari, even in his weakest state. She acknowledged their kind words with grace and assured them she would be back later that day. After exchanging goodbyes, she left them behind, and they turned their full attention once again to Jabari, who remained unconscious on the hospital bed. However, during Zuri's absence, something heartbreaking occurred. Jabari briefly regained consciousness, but according to the medical team, his condition was now extremely severe. "The situation is critical," the doctor informed the family with deep concern. "At this point, there's very little time left. Unless a miracle happens, we could lose him at any moment." That single statement plunged the entire room into panic and fear. Everyone in the room began to break down emotionally, crying out to God and pleading for divine intervention in Jabari's situation. Zuri, at that time, was still unaware of the recent development and only found out when she returned to the hospital later that evening. "Mom, what's going on? Is he going to be okay?" she asked anxiously. "I don't even know what to say anymore, my daughter." "I'm exhausted," Jabari's mother replied quietly, her voice heavy with grief. Each person in the room attempted to say comforting words to Jabari, hoping for a sign, any sign, that he could hear them, but he remained unresponsive. Zuri, refusing to give up hope, leaned closer to him and gently said, "Baby, can you hear me? We miss you terribly. We're all praying for you to rise from this bed and come home to us. We love you deeply, and you're going to get through this." Little did she know that Jabari was preparing to say his final farewell. He had reached his limit, emotionally and physically. Even though he was surrounded by people who loved him dearly, Jabari no longer had the strength or will to hold on, especially since the one person he had wanted to live for had already moved forward with someone else. It was a truly painful reality. As soon as Zuri finished speaking, the room grew silent. Moments later, Jabari softly broke the silence. "Hey baby, hold my hand," he said gently, extending his hand towards her. Without hesitation, Zuri grabbed it and moved closer. "You're going to pull through, I know it," she said, her voice filled with hope. Jabari gave a faint smile and looked into her eyes. Jabari tearfully confessed he couldn't bear seeing Zuri with someone else and chose to let go, apologizing for everything, especially not giving her the child they longed for. Then he paused and continued with a revelation. "I made arrangements with my doctor to preserve my sperm in a bank, just in case you ever wanted to use it one day. Don't worry, it's clean. I was on intensive treatment at the time of the procedure, and they were able to extract a healthy, HIV-free sample. If you ever go through with it, I pray our child looks just like you, because I was never the husband you deserved. You should have had the world, Zuri. I hope the 100 million transferred to your account, along with the properties I placed in your name, can at least make up for the pain I caused you. I love you deeply, but now, I have to go. Goodbye, my beautiful wife." With those final words, Jabari took his last breath. For several minutes, Zuri stood by his bedside in complete silence. Her lips didn't move, her body didn't flinch. She was completely stunned, her mind trying to comprehend what had just happened. There were no words to describe the tidal wave of thoughts that flooded her head at that moment. It took some time for everyone else to come to terms with the reality that Jabari was gone. But once the truth sank in, the wailing began. Zuri's cries were the loudest. The anguish overtook her, and she nearly collapsed from the intensity of the pain she felt. As the hospital staff came in to take Jabari's body away, his loved ones broke down even further. No one wanted to see him go. It was a horrifying day, one filled with unbearable grief. The pain was overwhelming for everyone, but for Zuri, it was especially devastating due to Jabari's final words. Her heart carried the full weight of everything he had left behind. A month later, Jabari was laid to rest in his hometown. The funeral service drew a large crowd. Business partners, colleagues, family, and friends all came to pay their respects. Zuri, determined to honor him, took charge of all the burial arrangements and gave it her all. She wept when no one was looking, but held herself together in front of others. That season of her life was one of the most difficult she had ever experienced, but the pain slowly began to ease after the burial. While everyone else returned to their normal routines, Zuri remained caught in the memory of their final conversation. Jabari's death had left a deep void in her. Not long after the funeral, she ended things with Benjamin. She wasn't emotionally ready to open her heart to another man, and the weight of her grief made it impossible to focus on love. She had reached a point where she no longer craved romance. She simply wanted peace. Every time thoughts of motherhood came up, Jabari's words about the preserved sperm echoed in her mind. She spent countless days and nights debating whether to proceed with IVF or not. It took over 3 months of reflection and prayer before she finally made up her mind. Zuri informed her doctor and began the process. She also spoke with Jabari's parents, who were overjoyed at the thought that a part of their son might still live on. They gave Zuri their full support and held on to hope. The first IVF attempt didn't succeed, but they didn't give up. On the second try, something miraculous happened. One morning, Zuri woke up feeling a tenderness in her breasts, something she had never felt before. At first, she brushed it off as nothing serious, but when the pain continued, she decided to get a pregnancy test kit. That evening, after returning from work, she took the test and froze when she saw 2 lines. Positive. For more than an hour, Zuri sat quietly on the floor, unable to speak. Her body was cold, but tears of happiness flowed freely down her cheeks. "I'm pregnant," she whispered to herself in disbelief. It was a moment of both joy and sadness. Joy because the miracle had happened. Sadness because Jabari wasn't there to share it. When Jabari's family received the news, the entire household was filled with celebration. As Zuri's baby bump began to show, Jabari's mother gently pleaded with her to come live with them so they could care for her throughout the pregnancy. Zuri agreed and moved in. She was cherished and cared for, until the 9th month, when she gave birth via cesarean section. The moment Zuri laid eyes on her baby boy, tears filled her eyes. She was speechless as she stared at her healthy newborn. Turning to Jabari's mother, she said with a smile through her tears, "His name will be Godwin." The name was met with overwhelming approval and joy. Zuri looked up toward the ceiling and whispered, "Thank you, Jabari. Thank you, my love. I can't wait to see you again one day. But until then, Godwin and I will hold things down here. I love you. Thank you for being my one true love." In the end, love did not die with Jabari. It transformed. It lived on in memory, in healing, and most beautifully, in Godwin. Sometimes the greatest pain bursts the deepest purpose, and though life may not go as planned, it can still be filled with grace, legacy, and new beginnings. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Loreroom, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching.